Have you ever started your car only to have the engine shut off a second later? Maybe it starts normally, runs for a moment, then suddenly dies. Or maybe it sputters, struggles to stay running before stalling completely. When that happens, it's easy to blame the battery, the starter, or even assume the engine has a major mechanical problem. But here's the surprising part. If the engine is able to start, the battery and starter have already done their job. That means the real problem usually begins after the engine fires up. It could be the anti-theft system preventing the engine from running, not enough air at idle, a fuel delivery problem, or a sensor sending incorrect information to the engine computer. The good news, the way your engine stalls can often tell you exactly where to start looking. In this video, I'll explain the most common reasons why a car starts and then dies immediately, why each one causes the engine to stall, and the key symptoms that can help you narrow down the real cause before replacing expensive parts. Let's get started. What's actually happening? So why can an engine start normally but die just a second later? To start, your engine needs 4 basic things: fuel, spark, air, and proper compression. If all 4 are present, the engine can fire up. But keeping it running is a completely different job. The moment the engine starts, the engine computer takes control. It continuously adjusts fuel delivery, controls the airflow into the engine, monitors sensor signals, and keeps the idle speed stable. If any one of those systems suddenly stops working or starts sending incorrect information, the engine may still start, but it can no longer keep itself running. That's why some engines shut off almost immediately, while others stumble, hesitate, or struggle for a few seconds before they stall. And here's the important part. The way your engine dies is often one of the biggest clues to what's actually wrong. For example, if the engine shuts off almost instantly, the anti-theft system should be one of your first suspects. If it struggles for a few seconds before dying, a fuel delivery problem becomes much more likely. And if the engine only stays running while you're pressing the accelerator, the throttle body or idle air control system deserves a closer look. As you'll see throughout this video, each symptom points toward a different system. Understanding those differences is the fastest way to narrow down the real cause before replacing parts that may not be faulty. Cause 1. Anti-theft immobilizer. If your engine starts, then dies almost immediately, within just 1 or 2 seconds, the anti-theft immobilizer system should be one of the very first things you check. Here's why. Modern vehicles use an immobilizer to verify that the correct key is being used before allowing the engine to keep running. Inside your key, or key fob, is a small transponder chip. When you start the engine, the immobilizer communicates with that chip. If the correct code is recognized, the engine continues running normally. But if the key isn't recognized, or there's a problem anywhere in the immobilizer system, the engine may still start briefly before the engine computer quickly shuts off the fuel injection or ignition system to prevent the vehicle from being driven. That's why an immobilizer problem usually causes the engine to stall almost immediately after it starts. One of the biggest clues is the security warning light on the dashboard. If you see a flashing key symbol, a padlock icon, or a security light that stays on after the engine stalls, there's a strong chance the immobilizer system is involved. And here's a quick check that can save you from replacing the wrong parts. If you have a spare key, try starting the engine with it. A damaged transponder chip, a weak key fob battery on some push-button start vehicles, or a fault within the immobilizer system itself can all produce exactly the same symptom. So before replacing the fuel pump, the throttle body, or any engine sensors, pay close attention to that security light. It may be telling you that the engine isn't stalling because of a mechanical problem at all. It's simply the security system preventing the vehicle from continuing to run. Cause 2. Dirty throttle body or idle air control valve. If the security system isn't causing the problem, the next thing to ask is, can the engine get enough air to keep idling? At idle, the throttle plate is almost completely closed. That means the engine depends on a very small, but carefully controlled, amount of airflow to keep running smoothly. Over time, carbon deposits can build up around the throttle plate, restricting that airflow. On vehicles equipped with an idle air control valve, a sticking or failed valve can create the same problem by preventing enough air from reaching the engine at idle. The engine may start normally, but as soon as it tries to settle into a stable idle, it simply can't get enough air and stalls. One of the biggest clues is when the engine only stays running while you're pressing the accelerator. That's because pressing the gas pedal opens the throttle plate, allowing more air into the engine. In other words, the engine wants to keep running, it just can't breathe properly at idle. That's why the throttle body, or the idle air control system on vehicles equipped with one, should be one of your first suspects. Before replacing sensors or fuel system components, take a close look inside the throttle body for heavy carbon buildup. A thorough cleaning, or repairing the idle air control system when equipped, is often all it takes to restore a smooth, stable idle. Cause 3. Fuel delivery problems. If the engine is getting enough air, the next system to verify is fuel delivery. Starting an engine doesn't require a large amount of fuel, but keeping it running requires a steady supply at the correct pressure. A weak fuel pump, a severely restricted fuel filter, or a problem with the fuel pump relay or power supply can allow the engine to start normally, but fail to deliver enough fuel a few moments later. As fuel pressure begins to drop, the air-fuel mixture becomes too lean, causing the engine to stumble, lose power, and eventually stall. Unlike an immobilizer problem, where the engine usually shuts off almost instantly, a fuel delivery problem often gives you a warning first. The engine may sputter, hesitate, or struggle for a few seconds before it finally dies. And that difference matters. It's one of the easiest ways to separate a fuel problem from an immobilizer problem. Before replacing the fuel pump, measure the fuel pressure with the proper gauge. A simple fuel pressure test can quickly tell you whether the engine is actually running out of fuel or whether it's time to continue looking elsewhere. Cause 4. Vacuum leaks. If both airflow and fuel delivery appear to be working properly, there's another problem that's surprisingly easy to overlook: a vacuum leak. Your engine is designed to receive a precise amount of air, measured by the engine's sensors. But if a cracked vacuum hose, a leaking intake, manifold gasket, or another air leak allows extra air into the engine, that air isn't measured by the engine computer. In other words, the engine is breathing air the computer doesn't even know exists. As a result, the air-fuel mixture becomes too lean, especially at idle, where the engine is most sensitive to unmetered air. The engine may start normally, but as soon as it tries to settle into a stable idle, it begins to run rough and eventually stalls. One thing that often makes this problem easier to recognize is that it may be worse when the engine is cold. A cold engine needs a richer air-fuel mixture to stay running. Even a small vacuum leak can upset that balance, making the engine much more likely to stall right after startup. Before replacing sensors or other expensive components, carefully inspect the vacuum hoses around the intake system. A cracked hose, a loose connection, or a leaking intake manifold gasket may be all that's standing between an engine that keeps running and one that starts, then dies. Cause 5. Faulty mass airflow, MAF sensor. If fuel delivery checks out and you haven't found any vacuum leaks, it's time to look at the information the engine computer is receiving. One of the most important sensors involved is the mass airflow sensor, or MAF sensor. Its job is to measure how much air is entering the engine. The engine computer uses that information to calculate exactly how much fuel to inject. The engine computer can only make good decisions when it receives good information. If the MAF sensor sends inaccurate data, the air-fuel mixture may become too rich or too lean, making it difficult for the engine to maintain a stable idle. The engine may start normally, run rough, hesitate, or even recover briefly before stalling. Here's one quick clue. On many vehicles, disconnecting the MAF sensor causes the engine computer to switch to a backup value. If the engine suddenly idles better or stays running longer with the sensor unplugged, the MAF sensor, or its wiring, deserves a closer look. But don't stop there. That isn't a final diagnosis. Before replacing the sensor, inspect it for dirt or contamination. Check the electrical connector and wiring, and scan the vehicle for diagnostic trouble codes. Sometimes, the problem isn't a failed sensor at all. It's simply bad information reaching the engine computer. Cause 6. Faulty crankshaft position sensor. If the fuel system checks out, the airflow looks normal, and the engine computer appears to be receiving accurate airflow data, it's time to consider something less common, but often much more frustrating: a faulty crankshaft position sensor. The crankshaft position sensor monitors the crankshaft speed and position. The engine computer relies on that signal to control both ignition timing and fuel injection. The moment the engine computer loses track of the crankshaft, it no longer knows when to fire the engine. If the signal becomes weak, intermittent, or disappears completely, the engine may start, but stall as soon as that signal is lost. One thing that makes this problem especially confusing is that it isn't always constant. In some vehicles, the engine may restart after sitting for a few minutes, only to stall again once the failing sensor heats up or begins losing its signal. That's why this problem can easily be mistaken for a fuel or ignition issue. Although a faulty crankshaft position sensor isn't one of the most common causes, it should definitely stay on your list, especially if the check engine light is on or the engine stalls unpredictably. Before replacing the sensor, inspect the electrical connector, check the wiring for damage, and scan the vehicle for diagnostic trouble codes, such as P0335. A little testing here can save you from replacing a sensor when the real problem is actually in the wiring or electrical connection. Cause 7. Low battery voltage or charging system problems. Before assuming the problem is something more complicated, don't overlook one of the most basic requirements for keeping an engine running: stable electrical power. Modern engines don't just need fuel and spark, they also need a reliable electrical supply. The engine computer, fuel injectors, fuel pump, ignition system, and many other electronic components all depend on proper system voltage to operate correctly. If the battery is weak, the battery terminals are loose or corroded, or the charging system isn't maintaining the correct voltage, those components may no longer function reliably. The engine may start, but once the voltage drops below what the system needs, it can quickly stall. While this isn't one of the most common causes, it becomes much more likely if you're also seeing other electrical symptoms. For example, dim headlights, multiple warning lights, slow or erratic electrical accessories, or other unusual electrical behavior. Before replacing the alternator, start with the basics. Make sure the battery terminals are clean, tight, and free of corrosion. Then test the battery and verify that the charging system is producing the correct charging voltage. A simple voltage test can often tell you whether low system voltage is causing the engine to stall or whether it's time to continue diagnosing another system. Quick diagnostic tips. Now that we've gone through the most common causes, here's how to narrow the problem down before replacing any parts. Start by paying close attention to how the engine stalls. That symptom alone can often point you in the right direction. If the engine starts, then shuts off within 1 or 2 seconds, check the anti-theft immobilizer system first. If it only stays running while you're pressing the accelerator, inspect the throttle body or the idle air control system if your vehicle is equipped with one. If the engine sputters, hesitates, or struggles for a few seconds before it dies, verify the fuel pressure and make sure the fuel system is supplying enough fuel. If the engine runs rough, especially during a cold start, carefully inspect the intake system for vacuum leaks. If unplugging the MAF sensor noticeably changes how the engine runs, inspect the sensor, its wiring, and the electrical connector before replacing anything. If the engine stalls unpredictably, or the check engine light is on, scan the vehicle for crankshaft position sensor related trouble codes. And if you're also noticing dim headlights, multiple warning lights, or other unusual electrical problems, test the battery and charging system. The important thing to remember is that the engine's behavior is often your biggest diagnostic clue. Instead of guessing which part has failed, let the symptoms guide your diagnosis. That's the fastest way to find the real problem and avoid replacing parts that were never faulty in the first place. If your car starts, then dies immediately, don't assume a single part is to blame. As you've seen, the same symptom can be caused by several different systems, from the anti-theft immobilizer to airflow problems, fuel delivery issues, vacuum leaks, faulty sensors, or even low system voltage. The difference is, each one leaves behind its own clues. That's why the way your engine stalls is often just as important as the fact that it stalls. The symptoms tell the story, if you know how to read them. So before replacing expensive parts, take a few minutes to diagnose the problem properly. It can save you time, money, and a lot of unnecessary frustration. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more step-by-step automotive diagnostic guides. And if your vehicle is showing this symptom, tell us the make, model, year, and exactly how the engine behaves in the comments below. The more details you share, the easier it is to point you in the right direction. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.